In the medieval world, love was a luxury, power was survival, and for royal women, marriage was rarely a choice. It was a weapon. Castles rose across Europe like stone fists. Kingdoms fought constantly, over land, faith, bloodlines, and pride. But not every war ended with execution. Sometimes, it ended with a wedding. A defeated king might lose his crown. A conquered land might lose its autonomy. But a princess lost herself. Royal brides were often exchanged as part of peace treaties. They were sent across hostile borders to marry the very men who had destroyed their father's armies. In theory, it was diplomacy. In reality, it was control. One of the clearest examples of marriage as conquest appears in the story of Eleanor of Aquitaine. At just 15 years old, Eleanor inherited Aquitaine, one of the wealthiest and most powerful territories in Europe. Whoever married her would control vast lands. She first married Louis VII of France. But when that marriage was annulled, something extraordinary happened. Within weeks, she married Henry II of England. That single union shifted the balance of power across Western Europe. Through marriage alone, England suddenly controlled more French land than the French king himself. Eleanor was not a passive bride. She was politically active and influential. But her marriage illustrates a brutal truth of the medieval era. A woman's body could carry entire empires. And not every bride was fortunate enough to wield influence. For many, marriage to a conqueror meant living in a foreign court where loyalty was always questioned. Imagine being sent to the castle of the man who defeated your family. Your language unfamiliar. Your customs mocked. Your safety uncertain. And your primary purpose: produce an heir. If you bore sons, you secured your position. If you failed, you became disposable. Royal brides were not just wives. They were living guarantees of submission. Their presence in a rival court symbolized that their homeland had been absorbed, neutralized, or broken. Sometimes they were treated with respect. Other times, they were kept under watch, isolated, or pressured into political silence. In Eastern Europe and the Byzantine world, royal marriages sealed fragile alliances between Christian and pagan states, or between rival empires. But peace built on forced marriage was never stable. Because beneath the silk gowns and jeweled crowns, resentment lingered. And sometimes, those brides would later become queens who plotted revenge. But in other cases, they disappeared into history. Their names forgotten. Their sacrifices unrecorded. Because medieval chronicles were written by men, and men recorded battles more often than bridal grief. Yet make no mistake. For centuries, royal daughters were currency. And war did not always end on the battlefield. Sometimes, it ended at the altar. Not all royal marriages followed defeat. Sometimes, they were preemptive strikes. A powerful king might demand a rival's daughter in marriage as a condition to prevent invasion. Refusal meant war. Acceptance meant surrender without bloodshed. One haunting example can be found in the life of Margaret of Anjou. Born into French nobility, she was married to Henry VI of England during the 100 Years' War, a marriage intended to secure peace between England and France. But instead of stability, her marriage placed her in the center of civil conflict. Henry VI's mental instability left Margaret effectively ruling in his place. She became both queen and political target. When the Wars of the Roses erupted, she was portrayed by enemies as manipulative, foreign, dangerous. Her marriage, originally meant as diplomacy, became ammunition. Royal brides were often blamed for conflicts they did not create. If war resumed, they were accused of divided loyalties. If peace failed, they were scapegoated. And in extreme cases, captured royal brides could be used as leverage. During medieval conflicts, it was not uncommon for noblewomen to be held hostage to ensure obedience from their families. Their treatment depended entirely on the captor's ambition. Some were honored guests in gilded confinement. Others were pawns moved across borders without consent. Marriage did not guarantee protection. It merely changed the form of captivity. Even in cases of strategic alliances between powerful kingdoms, a bride's value rested on one brutal fact: her ability to produce a legitimate male heir. If she succeeded, she became indispensable. If she failed, history shows little mercy. Annulment, exile, imprisonment in convents. The medieval world wrapped these acts in religious justification. But at their core they were political. A royal bride was not chosen for love. She was selected for bloodline, for land, for strategic geography. Her womb was a battlefield. And sometimes, her children would later fight wars against the land she left behind. Not every royal marriage involved formal treaties. Some followed outright conquest. When kingdoms fell, surviving daughters could be forcibly married into the conqueror's dynasty to legitimize control. In medieval Iberia, during the Christian Reconquista against Muslim-ruled territories, interfaith royal marriages were sometimes used to solidify fragile peace. But coercion often hid behind ceremony. In parts of Eastern Europe and Central Asia, Mongol invasions reshaped entire dynasties. Noble women from defeated states were integrated into ruling households. While not always treated cruelly, they were rarely asked. Consent was a luxury of stability. In England, after the Norman conquest of 1066, many Anglo-Saxon noblewomen were married off to Norman lords to cement control over land. Marriage replaced rebellion. A bride symbolized transfer of ownership. And yet, some royal brides adapted. They learned the language of their new court. They cultivated alliances. They influenced succession. Some even reshaped the kingdoms that claimed them. But that does not erase the truth. Many were transported across borders under political pressure they could not refuse. Their childhood homes became foreign territories. Their brothers became rivals. Their fathers became defeated kings. And they were expected to smile at their wedding feast. Medieval art romanticizes these unions, illuminated manuscripts showing serene brides, jeweled and composed. But the political reality was colder. Behind every royal wedding stood armed men. Behind every jeweled crown stood a power shift. Behind every bridal veil stood a treaty. And treaties were written in fear. Despite the darkness, not all royal brides remained powerless. Some turned imposed marriages into opportunities. Again, consider Eleanor of Aquitaine. After her marriage to Henry II deteriorated, she supported her sons in rebellion against him. She was imprisoned for years. But she survived, and later ruled as regent for her son, Richard I of England. Her story proves something powerful. Even within systems designed to control them, some royal women mastered the political game. Similarly, queens in the Byzantine Empire often served as regents and diplomatic negotiators. A bride could begin as a pawn. But sometimes, she became the most dangerous piece on the board. Even centuries later, the echoes of those forced marriages remain in history and in bloodlines. Many of these royal brides left descendants who would inherit thrones across Europe. Some of those descendants became kings and queens. Others became pawns in new wars. The marriages forged under duress created dynasties whose legitimacy was tied to conquest and coercion. Take, for example, the marriages arranged after the 100 Years' War. Young noblewomen from France were sent to England, not as diplomats, but as trophies, symbols that their lands were now claimed by another crown. Their children would inherit claims on both sides of the conflict, creating generations of tension and rebellion. These brides often lived under constant scrutiny. Every decision, every word, every child they bore could ignite a political crisis. Their lives were a blend of privilege and imprisonment, power and surveillance. Few had the freedom to shape their own destiny. Some adapted and survived. They became skilled negotiators, cultural bridges, and subtle power brokers. Their resilience was extraordinary, often overlooked in historical texts. Others disappeared into obscurity, their names forgotten, their suffering recorded only in cryptic chronicles or the margins of illuminated manuscripts. The legacy of these women is more than just the bloodlines they created. It's a testament to the human cost of political ambition. War did not end with swords. It continued in bedrooms, in courtrooms, and in the lives of the daughters, sisters, and wives taken as spoils. In modern times, we may romanticize medieval queens and princesses, the flowing gowns, the glittering crowns, the majestic palaces. But behind every jewel was a story of loss, resilience, and survival. Every triumph of a kingdom was paid for by the quiet endurance of women who had no voice in the wars that shaped their fates. As we look back at history, it's easy to focus on kings and generals, on victories and battles. But to truly understand the dark medieval reality, we must see the world through the eyes of the brides, women who bore the weight of empires on their shoulders, whose lives were treated as war trophies, and whose courage was often unrecorded. Their stories remind us that the consequences of conquest extend far beyond the battlefield. Royal brides were not merely symbols of power, they were living witnesses to the brutal, unyielding reality of medieval politics. Their suffering, resilience, and legacy remain intertwined with the history of Europe, echoing across centuries in a silent but undeniable testament to survival under impossible circumstances. Because in the end, for these women, marriage was never about love. It was about survival. And surviving, in a world built on conquest, was itself an act of defiance.